Chisel Hedgehog, Crazy Great Summer, Book 1, Search for the Past, by Perry Crompton. Text, music, lyrics, and illustration copyrights by Perry Crompton, 2012. Musical arrangements and performance by Andreas Geck, except Thinking of the Memories by Billy Stevens. Illustrations by Baruch Inbar, colored by Perry Crompton. Chapter 1, Worms for Dinner. Wednesday, June 2nd, 11 a.m. Flying in the sky, a fly passed high above farms, pine trees, and a river. Then it was sucked into a large swirling mass of wind. Leaves and cloudy air whizzed by it, and the fly began turning and tumbling wildly until suddenly it was blown out the other side, like a spitwad shot out of a tube. The sky it was blown into looked very different from the other side. It was rainbow-colored. The fly was dizzy and fell down toward the ground until it landed on handlebars attached to a pole that was connected to a skateboard. A fan was attached to the end of the skateboard, and wings were sticking out of the bottom sides of it. Looking at the flying skateboard was a hedgehog who looked to be about 8 years old. He was wearing blue pants, a lime green t-shirt, orange suspenders, and wearing a purple backpack. Chisel Hedgehog then turned and went inside the house. "Oh, there you are, Chisel," his mom Maisie said. "Mr. Otter is at the front door and said he wants to see you." Chisel gasped with fear on his face and exclaimed, "Hoot Baloot!" As he ran out the back door, he yelled, "Bye, Mom! I'm going to Volcano Island!" He ran down the back stairs, grabbed his flying skateboard, flipped the fan switch, and pushed it toward the street. When he built up speed, he pulled on the ropes to pull out the wings all the way, and swoosh! Up he went. On the front porch, Mr. Otter saw a blur fly into the sky to his left. It was spinning out of control, rolling and flipping, and making high-pitched screaming noises as it rose in the sky. It sounded like Chisel Hedgehog! Mr. Otter yelled up at the disappearing object. "I'll get you, Chisel Hedgehog!" Soon Chisel was out of sight, flying high above Shady Road Street toward Shady Glen. He was over the beach trail when he lost hold of the handlebars and fell through the sky. Luckily, he landed in a deep, thick mud puddle, which stopped him from getting hurt. Chisel didn't see, but behind some bushes a little ways to his left, a pair of eyes watched him intently, unblinking. The leopard glared at Chisel as his eyebrows lowered, looking mean and mad. Behind the leopard, deep in the shadows of the pine tree forest, something watched the leopard. The shape was hard to make out in the darkness, but almost looked see-through, like a ghost. Chisel looked around but couldn't tell where he was. "I've got to get to the lighthouse and then to Volcano Island. It's urgent," he thought. "I've got to escape and solve the mystery." He climbed a tall dead tree to look around, but when he pulled himself over the bundle of sticks at the top, to his surprise 4 eaglets were looking up at him. Chisel was covered with mud, so it was hard to tell what he was, and the eaglets started chirping for food. "No, no, birds, I'm a hedgehog, not your mom," Chisel said. When he didn't feed them, they became mad and started pecking at him. Then he looked up and saw the mother eagle coming in for a landing. Chisel was so scared that he opened his mouth very wide and yelled, "Ah!" The mama eagle looked at Chisel, who was covered in mud, and figured he had fallen from the nest into mud and then made it back to the nest. That was the loudest chirp she had ever heard, and since Chisel's mouth was open much wider than any of the other eaglets, she knew he was the hungriest. So she stuffed into his mouth and down his throat a whole mouthful of plump brown worms, slurpy slimy slugs, and warm gooey snail guts. This stopped him from hollering, but he had the most disgusted look on his face. After she flew off, Chisel decided he better get out of that nest, and fast. So down the tree he climbed, and he ran toward town. As Chisel came running down Main Street, he saw all his friends who were on lunch break from school. "You guys will never believe what just happened to me," Chisel erupted. "This eagle thought I was one of her babies and made me eat worms, slugs, and snail guts." This tale was one of the best that Chisel had ever told them, and they all started laughing loudly. "No, really," Chisel assured them. As he kept talking, the group slowly all looked above and in back of Chisel. When Chisel finally looked around to see what they were looking at, it was too late. Mama Eagle had found her baby chick that she figured had fallen out of the nest again, scooped him up with her claws, and started flying back toward the nest. Mama Eagle flew back to the nest, stuffed Chisel back in, fed him more snail guts and worms, and again left. When she left, those eaglets started pecking at him even harder than before, because he had taken their dinner again. Chisel then headed over the sticks and down the tree. A little slower this time, though, because his stomach was so full of snail guts and worms. This time he ran under trees on the beach trail, where he finally escaped. From then on, he never seemed to like spaghetti quite as much. Meanwhile, Mr. Otter had traveled to the mean mink's house in the big city. No one liked the mean minks. When they were around, you better look out for a slurpy wet spitwad being shot in your ear, being hit by a muddy water balloon, or being tripped by a leg that suddenly came out from a bush. The four mean mink brothers answered the door. "You have a bad reputation," Mr. Otter said. "Thank you," the oldest mink, Milford, said, smiling, thinking they were being complimented. "I need you to find someone for me," said Mr. Otter. "Then get out your money, we're not cheap. Who do you want us to find?" "Have you ever heard of Chisel Hedgehog?" When Mr. Otter said this name, all their eyes popped open wider, and then anger covered their faces. Milford lunged forward and grabbed Mr. Otter by the throat with his right hand. He snarled, "Don't you ever mention that name in front of us again!" Mr. Otter gulped. "How much would it cost to catch, that guy?" Milford let go of Mr. Otter, but was still too mad to answer, so his brother slowly replied, "That guy is free!" And the other three nodded in stern-faced approval. Mr. Otter then asked, "I knew you were mean, but not that you hated that guy so much. Why's that?" The minks looked at him very upset. Then Milford growled, "Because of that thing!" "That thing?" asked Mr. Otter. "That thing!" Milford yelled. "That happened back then!" Mr. Otter decided he'd better not ask what that thing was. Then the minks started packing for their trip to catch Chisel Hedgehog.